Welcome Scorpio to your in-depth monthly forecast for December 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. If you order your year 2025 personal horoscope forecast, you also get your life roadmap report 30% off, but also my free gift of your zodiac general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast for the coming year. Please see the link below for more. The personal forecast is totally unique to each person it's produced for and will give you searing insights for the next year. You'll get the rest of 24 free. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart right at the start of the month. We need to be mindful of your traditional ruler Mars. Mars starts this month in a glorious alliance to the Moon, but also to the North Node. The Moon is applying to the Sun right at the start of the month as we reach into the new moon in Sagittarius. But the position of Mars for you is very much to do with authority. So if you're wanting to raise your profile professionally, apply for a job, do a presentation, that link back to that new moon right at the start of the month from Mars is really going to embolden you. And what about the North Node? Well, the North Node is your sixth sense. It's a guiding principle, pulling you towards just the right practical opportunity where you can demonstrate your authority, your talent and your drive with the help of Mars, but also get what you deserve in terms of the rewards, the new moon in your sector of everyday money. But what about Pluto? Pluto's your modern ruler, your higher octave ruler, and that starts this month in the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to be coming into an opposition with Mars over the last 3 days of the month, and that is a mighty event. So I will go through that with you shortly. But also at the start of the month, Mercury, the planet of communication, like the Moon and the Sun, is in Sagittarius. But of course it is in retrograde. So if you have been finding it a little bit of a struggle to get money paid to you that's owed since the 26th of November when the retrograde began, or from the 7th of November when the pre-retrograde shadow began, not a complete surprise. But we need to think Mercury outside just the prism of money, because the second house can be how we think about our value and self-worth. And it's possible that Mercury's retrograde has actually been very good for you, helping you to analyse where you might be able to approach things in a little bit of a different way. And that reprise is also blessed by the exuberant energies of Jupiter right at the start of this month. So Jupiter in your 8th house of long-term finance, Mercury in the 2nd house of everyday money are in an opposition. But of course they're both located in locations which makes them in detriment. But that mutual receptivity there could give you a sense of optimism that you are on the up in terms of your income, or at least getting a greater sense of your value from all the hard work you've been investing, and that's a really good thing. What's not to like? Well, of course, the Christmas period can be a time when we can have extra costs, and we can also be tempted to be very generous to the people that we love. And perhaps if there is one qualifying factor at the start of this month on those Sagittarian positions, it is Saturn. So Saturn is the planet of structure, time, karma, but it has been in the 5th house for you since March 2023. And of course it did go through its long 20-week retrograde. So it's just coming out of that, but it is broadly squaring up with both the square between Jupiter and Mercury and also the new moon. So however much you set your intentions at the start of this month, you can blow a hole in them if you're wanting to be a bit cannier about your resources by perhaps being a bit too a bit too free and easy with your finance. So Saturn's basically saying to you, look, if you're caught up in getting your situation working as best you can with all the cost of living increases we've all been faced with, Saturn's just saying keep working at it. Don't be too frivolous, because it could be something that you ultimately regret. But you know, right at the start of this month, Scorpio, you could have a dazzling conversation. You can be a little bit cautious. Of course, your observations on others can be very direct. But because Venus, the planet of relating, is in a very gracious part of your scope at the start of this month, your third house, that gives you an added dimension tonally, even in terms of expressing your ideas, because of the warmth of Venus and the becomingness of Venus. Well, that's linking to Uranus in your sector of relating. Is there somebody that you're going to connect to in the first week of this month? It is entirely possible. That's an electric connection. Things can happen very quickly with Uranus in the mix. What about if you're rooted in a long-term relationship? Well, I feel that if finances are improving, or at least you're on the same page in working through the pressure that Christmas can create, I feel that the cazimi, which occurs on the 6th, where the Sun and Mercury are completely unified, because Mercury's in a retrograde, it's an inferior conjunction, the Sun glows up and magnifies the ability of Mercury. Mercury is the communicator, but it's also the planet of precision for its rulership of Virgo. So your ability to analyse your situation crisply is increased on that day. But also on that day, your traditional ruler Mars slams on the brakes. It's going to be in a retrograde through to the 23rd of February, but it's actually for you going to reverse back into your 9th house of exploration and adventure on the 6th of January. So if you had been thinking about flying off somewhere for some sun or snow, Mars perhaps is telling you at this stage, particularly with the retrograde, if there are some headwinds professionally, perhaps it's just trying to get everything organised to get through the festivities. Mars slowing down just is saying to you, use your assertion carefully and appropriately, particularly when he goes face to face with Pluto, because Pluto is in that 4th house of emotional this month, and that's where the big transformations are going to be through to 2043 initially, then 44, because of the brief sojourn of Pluto into Pisces in the interim. But on the 7th, Neptune, which has been giving you a lot of beguiling energy around your social and romantic and creative situations since 212, ends its long retrograde, which began on the 2nd of July. If you have felt uncertain, a bit confused around those areas of life, not a complete surprise. And of course, Saturn may have been applying some limitations or restrictions or demands that have made life quite complex. But on the same day, Venus moves to join up with Pluto in your 4th house. And as much as you may be focused on those practical financial strands at the start of this month, or you may be having that dazzling connection, that application of Venus to Pluto is going to make you mightily aware of who your connections are to key people in your world. It might not be romantic. It could be family members. It could be a friend. It could be someone that you're very close to who's a neighbour. Because what Venus and Pluto does is amps up the intensity of what we feel, because for you it's in house 4. Now if you are wanting to make some changes to your home, some home improvements, and that could be your focus through the winter sales, Venus being in the 4th house and being triggered by Pluto could give you a lot of a desire to make some last minute changes, perhaps before anyone actually turns up for Christmas if you're hosting, or visiting those stores and making those shrewd and canny purchases that can help you to create the home hub that really helps you to retreat and restore in the way that you need. But Venus and Mars do go into an opposition from the 10th to the 15th. That actually can give people more desire when it comes to romance and intimacy, But because Mars is in your 10th house, that's about leadership. It is in its retrograde, of course, by now. But Venus is saying stay in touch with your vulnerability. Because if you let that desire to show your strength through Mars dominate perhaps some of your sensitivities, maybe someone's not necessarily going to see the best of you. But the full moon, which occurs on the 15th, for you is in your sector of transformation. And if there is something that isn't quite working in your situation, as Mercury goes direct on the same day, but Neptune, despite going direct, is in a swirling, misty T-square to both the moon and the sun, there may be some confusion. So if you are in a relationship which isn't really working and the pressure of Christmas is creating more dilemmas, as Jupiter and Saturn clash on Christmas Eve, it could bring all the politics to a peak. Think back to the 19th of August, that's when this last happened. It's going to happen next year on the 15th of June, but by that time Saturn will have moved briefly into Aries, Jupiter more positively into Cancer. However, the square here, Saturn in the 5th house, could be said to be a bit anti-joy. It's not really fair. What Saturn's saying is you need to really work at it, but also you need to know what you really want. Jupiter in the 8th house could be more, particularly in its retrograde, about the lusty side of things, the desire for intimacy. But if there is some kind of block that isn't really working, sadly, because of the time of year it is, it could become more obvious. And on the 21st, we did see the sun move into the sign of Capricorn, which speeds life up for you. This ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, a backdrop which lasts for 13 weeks through to the spring equinox. And the pace of life is going to be really fast for you in the early part of next year. Chiron also goes direct on the 29th. Now, the North Node, which does apply in a T-square to the winter solstice, is in Aries too. And for you, that is about your physical health, but it can also be about life organization. You might feel a little bit conflicted if there are different people who want you to spend time with them at different occasions for New Year, for example. Keeping all of the people happy all of the time may prove a little challenging, but I feel that if you have felt a bit under par with Chiron's retrograde, or it's felt that you've spent a lot of time supporting other people, a good moment to take a few days just to breathe. Then with the new moon in Capricorn, the black moon, the 2nd of the month, on the 30th, what a glorious end to the year for you personally, because that really is going to speed things up. But the collision between Mars and Pluto reaches a higher point of intensity as the month comes to a close. If you want to discover what year 2025 will hold for you, please click on the link underneath this video and you can watch my deep dive, which really is very detailed. But I feel as this year comes to a close, just be aware that when this year began, Mercury was in a retrograde, and it was in your 2nd house of everyday resources. So if you end this year still trying to work out exactly the right balance on the ins and outgoings of your finances, particularly with that full moon emphasizing that, and there's still a little bit of extravagance you could squeeze out of the equation because of Neptune being very much to do with temptation in house 5, well, that may be something you can reflect on. But I feel that what you can also do is communicate how you feel, because with Venus and Pluto in your 4th house, you really are being set up to demonstrate a much greater connection to your own inner world. And although you can be very canny, shrewd, and also have a penetrating ability to see what other people are doing, I feel as you're going into this new year, if you can apply those talents to your own inner world, that's going to be a huge area of growth in year 2025. Have a great Christmas and New Year. All the best, Scorpio, and goodbye.